We go.
Oh, are you on?
Oh.
Yeah.
There we go. Oh, we back on.
I'll just turn this off. Are you using my phone? No.
Yes, you are using your phone. Okay, now it's actually showing up on my screen. Okay, so
I'm just trying to
we're
get out of
using
it.
your phone.
This is a
Using my phone?
Yeah.
Is this the podcast? Is it?
We're getting so much distortion. This is some kind of experimental performance work that I'm in love with. Sorry, everyone. Apologies for the delay this morning. We've been having internet and last-minute tech issues, with which I'm sure you're all aware always happens in terms of Murphy's Law at the last minute. Today's going to be a pretty wild final ride, which I'm very excited about. I'm just going to introduce myself. I'm Matto Lucas. This is the final session of Home Delivery Click and Connect, a new program that was created online to bring exciting performances, artist talks, and various shenanigans like this to you on your lunch break, for you to engage with creatives in Hobsons Bay. Before we do kick off and try and stumble our way through this, I am going to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we meet today. We're all meeting on different lands, but the lands of the Kulin Nation are the people in which we work, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. They were the traditional and original artists and educators. A little bit of housekeeping, which might seem a bit hypocritical given our lateness and our fumbling, but if you could keep your cameras turned off and your mics off, please feel free though to pop your questions or comments or anything in the chat, and we'll try and read them out to Geoff and Heidi as we go through and at the end of the session. So without further ado, now I know that you're on mute at the moment, Heidi. So I'm just going to ask you to unmute so we can hear you eventually. Beautiful. I'm going to introduce you to our two amazing artists, if that intro wasn't exciting enough. Heidi Weatherald and Geoffrey Ricardo, both very established local artists. Thank you so much for joining with us today and for putting up with the kind of tech issues this morning. How are you doing?
We're breathing now.
Yeah. Sorry, it was for some reason my computer did something it hasn't done before.
But the magic flying pig has waved its wand, and in we go. It just did a cameo role. Yeah.
Never a problem. Not a problem before. Problem now, of course.
Yeah, all good.
Worked fine the other day. Anyway, so let's talk about art stuff.
Slides for you. So feel free to just tell me when to click through. But I'm really interested and excited to present the project you've been working on, Come Fly With Me. Would you be interested to give a bit of an intro to everyone that's joined us today about this project?
Yes, I'll take over very, very quickly. So this particular project was an idea that we were thinking of in 2019, where we were down at the Shefflin, I always get the pronunciation wrong, the migratory Chiefland wetlands, with the migratory birds, and we had seen like there was a bird festival in Vancouver, and we thought, it'd be so great if we could have a welcoming of the migratory birds or a farewell of the migratory birds on Migratory Bird Day. And so we started chatting about it, and then maybe even starting to put things in action to think if this was a possible thing. And COVID hit, and it was like, oh, well, what do we do now? We'll just park that project. And then Regional Arts Victoria, with the Victorian government, had a initiative for creative workers in schools. So they were looking for artists to work with schools with an art project. And what was fantastic about this project was that it meant that we didn't have to, we could actually just be looking at our practice rather than actually having an outcome. And we had, we were thinking of an outcome, but we also had that privilege of being able to work with the children and the school and to see where that project takes us. So we started off with an idea of this grand. We're going to have a bird parade, celebrating and looking at migratory birds. And it kind of pivoted, which was really great. I think at that time it was challenging, but it meant that we had to start really listening to working together with the students and what was happening to us within our community as well. And it became quite playful.
Having a non-outcome based grant or opportunity is incredibly valuable for an artist, just to be able to work through that process and practice. And both of you have been working together for a decade now. Is that right?
Was it a decade?
Probably, yeah. When we
first met.
When I first did the project for Wish or Coming
Outside.
Yeah,
I employed Geoffrey to work with my theatre company Pocketful, which makes original children's work. And at that time we were writing an operetta, and he was the perfect example to come on board to work with that project as our set designer and collaborator. And in that time, but previous to that, we'd done a lot of work in Mildura as well, with the Mildura Wentworth Festival, the Art Vault. Festival. So Geoffrey done residencies up there, and we had such a great time with community connections, and the collaboration together just seemed to be quite seamless. So from that, we'll talk about an idea and then collaborate.
Amazing. So Heidi, your background is in theatre mostly, and Geoff, yours is in visual art or fine art, would you say?
I always call it visual arts because it's all fine arts, but there's I do the visual stuff. I make sculptures and visual, pictures.
Beautiful. What a perfect kind of coalesced combination. And how have you found this project working together, not being outcome or product based rather than process based, after working together for so many years?
Look, for me, that was a challenge at first because I was quite set on an idea. But with Geoffrey, it was just wonderful to work with Geoffrey. We actually also worked with a musician as well, Daniel Smith. He has a rock school, so that was great. So he brought in another energy as well to the group from the rock and roll side. So it was great to have these kind of different practicing artists and to watch their process in the room. I learned so much from Geoffrey when watching him working with the students, and just to let go. So I would come in using, like, my safety net was to plan and then to see what would happen. Because in an acting process, our process is quite different when we're trying to, like, we're working on a script.
Yeah.
But my practice when I'm working on an original idea is play. So it kind of reminded me, working with Geoffrey in the space and the students reminded me, like, be in the moment, see where this takes us. And it was very liberating.
That's awesome. That's incredibly valuable. And as we've seen this morning, the best laid plans, they go to waste. So.
Yeah.
Now, do we want to talk about the project itself? Should I move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's move.
I think you can go through, just stop at anything you find interesting or...
Yeah, if anyone else finds interesting.
Okay, so
Yep.
Keep going. Anyway, so that's probably that last slide.
We'll go back to the last slide. I was gonna point to it, but when Geoffrey looks like he's standing in the middle of an oval with a strange apparatus. One thing we were asked for this particular project is, what do you want to explore in your practice as an artist? And mine was podcasting and putting, ideas into a media form, while Geoffrey's was, I'll let him talk about this.
Well, I wasn't really sure. All I knew that we were starting with the idea of the migratory birds as basically a theme. And I simplified it down from that to something more rudimentary, like, well, I'm not sure how we're going to do that with a school and how we're going to organise everybody, especially given that this is all because of COVID, where we are at that particular point in time, that I thought, well, okay, the only thing I could think of starting was, I'm going to start with a bird motif. And from there, we're going to just kind of see how that grows and develops. And we've got to see what I can come up with that actually can be taken on by the students.
Yep.
And what they can achieve with it, or something they can play with and explore. So I just did these sort of fairly simple things, as you can see on this slide.
But the one in the middle.
The one in the middle, me playing with that. Well, I also got a bit onto, because we were working with a musician and we were thinking of sounds, and I was thinking about how can I make something more musical sculptures? And that came to, well, okay, so we can, how do you make sounds and music with objects?
Which was an extension of when we'd worked together previously when we were writing the operetta Wish. Geoffrey had made all these props with recycled strings from guitars or violins to made all these fantastic objects for us to play live with children. So this was like him wanting to extend that musical, what kind of instruments can you play? So with this particular character we can see here, we were working with the grade 6s at this stage, and they started making totems, bird totems, and they just embraced that fact that each of their classroom had this crazy totem. I'm going to go and get one of those totems. And
do you want me to so we started from those, basically started with two things we started with. You can see in that middle slide there's the bird. Do you want to put the video of us back on and I'll just show you roughly what we did? Can you go?
Which slide was the video, sorry?
No, they actually go back to seeing us. The real ones, us.
Oh, as in stop sharing. Yes, there we go.
Yes.
And
he's going to make something, and I'm going to bring in
we just started. I didn't know what I was doing, so I just started by, hey kids, can we just draw a bird?
Yep.
A flying bird. Whatever you do, which was kind of an interesting bit of a challenge for them. So you can see that?
Vaguely. Yep.
Vaguely. So it's shiny piece of paper. Anyway, there's a simple bird on there. So we just started by, the simplest thing was just to get a pair of scissors and fold the paper in half. Just the simplest thing we could do, so the birds, the students, I keep saying kids, the little non-goats. So we could do, basically from that, we could then make birds that we could then carry around and flap around, and we can play. And
well, we could actually, I'm going to step in as the actor. We could then animate them, and we can bring them to life, and they would fly them. And during this time as well, we would, each session we'll basically writing a piece of live theatre and use these kind of objects into a moving narrative, or whether it be shadow puppetry, or with an installation for the day, or would take them outside and explore other kind of visual elements through interactive kind of conversations as well. So, and writing scripts and, building characters with these. That was the very first thing. Yep. And they all could do that. But that then led into, can I show the next thing?
Yep.
All right. So that led into, Geoffrey's making one right now. But the grade 7s went, we like making these masks. And the mask experiment was because we couldn't share objects because of COVID. Everything had to be COVID safe, which is very challenging when you're doing visual arts and theatre.
And
those kind of practices constantly. So we started making these masks.
It's like a plague doctor.
Yeah, it is exactly
very much. And that was
we have plague doctors masks here, the Commedia masks we have in the studio
so we turned into making, like.
Oh, amazing! Oh, that's.
And then we started. Then, because we couldn't use the mask, we started putting them into physical objects where they could individually use with their hands, which is what Geoffrey does. We had beaks we had wings, and then we had these crazy totems that they made.
Oh, wow.
But all of these also had, like this was a lagerphone, so you could play it like a lagerphone. Everything started turning to instruments. The slide that we saw before with Geoffrey with that strange kind of twirly thing.
I wanted to teach them how to make flutes. So I worked out how to make little plastic or bamboo flutes, and realized that then we couldn't actually, because of COVID and being airborne, we couldn't actually do that. So we had to get away from actually blowing through it. So I was trying to think of other ways I could actually make a flute.
So we made sound.
So we got on to doing, you get a tube and you blow through it.
Sorry. But can I add the other bit for that? So Geoffrey was playing with this out in the yard.
So I got one of these from Bunnings.
And then he was playing with the yard, and suddenly the birds, the magpies in the yard, the local birds started talking back to him. It was hilarious.
That's amazing.
On there.
Wow.
And then attached to that, so they had what they called warblers. So this was their totem. And I'll link into that story about that totem and why that happened was, can I get you to hold that?
Yeah.
Because I need to use my hands. So the story from the school is, so handing it over to their, working with the school and what is their story. The day we arrived, a bird, a magpie, was in the art studio. And it kept coming back. And so this story started spreading around the school from the grade 6s to the preppies about the story about the bird. And so that's how these warblers kind of started coming about. So that's what the grade 6s said, this is what we are. It's all about them connecting as well and being part of their community, because they'd all been away last year as well too.
Yeah, that's amazing. There's like so much. I mean, that's incredibly rich and deep. There's like lots of visual art outcomes, you know, sculptural, performative, the sound element, but also in terms of mysticism. Just hearing that kind of story about before you arrived to do this project, the bird appearing and then the bird's talking back to you. There's this level of kind of shamanistic mysticism happening within the work, which, I mean, obviously you must be aware of as well.
Absolutely. And that was one of the, you know, from the very beginning, I was very aware of wanting to connect to country as well. But coming from how do we do it as the community that we're in. So these elements were coming through and through and through, and all the way through to when we had to keep pivoting. Like we had a great bird parade day where we made a portal and they all came through the entrance and they're all dressed up in their choice of costumes. Yeah. And then
that was the replacement for the book day, wasn't it?
It was a replacement for Book Week. So we had a bird parade for Book Week instead.
The art teacher suggested doing that.
Yeah, she did. So Elaine suggested that. And so that was terrific. They owned it. And thank goodness, because that was the only whole school thing we were able to do. And then we locked down again. They were back at home remote learning. So we had to keep thinking, what are we going to do with this? And in the end, we go through the slides. Yep. All these things that we were having, those moments in a lunchtime program, or a moment that happened with us playing outside during recess and asking their ideas and sharing, things started coming together. And in the end, we pivoted to a interactive installation, which they came in with groups with little torches and interacted to these spaces that were from all their ideas and all the things they were making, and we were able to build that.
Do you want to flick through the slideshow? And just go through and you'll see some of the things.
I'm just going to quickly read out some comments because they're coming through. Saying I would have loved to be a student in that class. Me too. I mean, I want to come play with you guys now.
Thank you.
Saying, love you guys. You're so funny. Oh my God, that's amazing and amazing. Love it. Yeah, I think this is pretty incredible. Let me just go back to your slides for you, and we can continue on. Okay, so here we go.
Yeah, so these shapes that we're seeing at the moment, that was from our very first session when, again, went chaos. Geoffrey and I did not expect every student to come to the lunchtime session. We were just going, Geoffrey had an idea. We had to ditch an idea. We were going to make flags. So we'd been head on about, like, our horns had locked going, how's this going to work? And then we just went, they've arrived. We've got to ditch that. And he just grabbed these albums. Do you want to show? Oh, because we had resourced these. Geoffrey collects everything.
Actually, do you want to put the us back on again?
So this is important.
Okay.
So rock and roll.
Hang on. Do you want me to share where these came from? Does anyone remember the Melbourne Museum of Printing that was in Geelong Road in West Footscray? It's closed now. The guy was a nut. He just collected everything. He was obsessed with old antique printing. And I went, when they each finally closed down, they auctioned everything off. And I got this half a pallet of these, which are the really original Record Club album covers, which there was one for every album that was done. And so I got probably a couple of thousand of these. Anyway, that's what we used because I needed some cardboard to use, and we just wanted to get going. So I grabbed all this and we started, and Heidi loved it. And
so I kind of went, hey, because some of them had those old 1970s rock and roll kind of images. And I didn't, for this project, you know, my first idea with a project.
Slideshow now.
Slideshow. First idea with a project is to have music which is like, you know, with birds, it's always beautiful, it's orchestral, there's all these kind of sounds, and people have done some beautiful projects with that, but our practice is a little bit more quirky, it's a little bit more wacky, and
I can tell.
so we wanted it to come, which did resonate with the students, because the first workshop they said is, we want more comedy, we want more humor. And that's what we would get from them. We said, well, all right, let's get Flying Pig happened. This flying, we'll just bring it. You can hear that. The Flying Pig emerged, and that became like a thing that they'd come in and say, can we take the Flying Pig out to the yard? And we'd go, yeah, no problem. But coming back to that train of thought, so the albums were the perfect card to sculpt with. It linked in, everything links. And we're also very, our practice is all about sustainability. And whenever we can reuse something, we'll always reuse it as well. So Geoffrey is amazing. He was always on the lookout for that. Borderline hoarder, but the materials always get used. But back to the picture that we're looking at the moment. So this was part of our madness of like, so Geoffrey took half the group out and I was left with the other half. And I went, oh, that's right, I've got a big black, big roll of black paper. I just rolled it out, gave them pencils and said, I'll just draw around yourselves. And they ended up, and I said, but make sure you add yourself some wings, a beak, and that's it. That's all I had. Oh, and I said, don't forget the tail. And they came up with these beautiful images, which this image that we then made into these cutouts, plywood cutouts, which
were freestanding,
which a helper from the school did that. Yeah. The groundsman, he loves to do part of that. But with that as well, we wanted the voice of the students. So not only have we the ideas, these were scattered throughout the school during the day, so the students could walk past them. But we had little sound bites on them, so recording sound bites. So on each of them, they could go past and press it, and they would learn about a bird story. Thus, that bird story that started about the magpie just grew and grew and grew. It just morphed into this crazy, story.
There's so many different outcomes, and it looks it sounds really important that playing and not having a kind of definitive end product or divisive kind of end to a project can create such rich outcomes, especially for children with the visual arts. I am aware we are, because we were a little bit out of time, we are running a little bit, and I don't want to run out of time for your slides, so I'm just going to quickly skip through, and if you just want to briefly talk about...
Absolutely.
Yep.
With the shadows?
No, they can see that. That was fun. Shadow play. Keep going. Oh, the student reflections, we've talked about that. We just listened to them. We always would have conversations, or they'd write them on, or they'll draw us a picture, and that would then take us for what they were looking at. Just provocations and things we'd leave in the yard. The crazy beak bird, the bird beak of evolution we talked about. Them always giving me notes about, because I was always forgetting things. So students would put little stickers on me to remember things. That was bird parade. We can keep going faster, actually.
Yeah.
That's a bit of fun. This is really special. So lockdown happened, and I'll be really quick with this. There was this thing usually about, because I was the performer, they wanted me to dress up a lot, and I kept going, well, depending what my role is. And then at the end of lockdown, we came back for a week, and if you go to the next slide, a student came up to me and said, I've made you this. And that ended up being the character in the installation that I played to kind of connect the interactive installation as the students came in. So again, everything would come, just kind of segue to something from what their ideas were as well. Then we could just extend that idea. If you keep going with the slides, keep going. Yeah, that's Birdtopia. And it was a mixture of, they could come in, play their own music. Oh, also the soundscape for it as well was, what is it called? When a student wrote all the music for the soundscape.
Oh, amazing.
So we had choirs, we had bands, and then Daniel worked with students to compose the soundscape for the interactive installation. So that was
amazing.
Terrific again. So it's all original. And this last little bit is what we want to leave with, because if we thought about what was great about this experience, we always keep saying it was about the students, particularly those students who came and found us. there was a cohort of students who perhaps in the classroom they needed to have a little bit of a rest, and they'd find us and sit on the outside of the studio, because we were we had like an atelier kind of set up in a room, very fortunate, which would be there 3 days a week. And this is one of the letters one of the students gave to us when we left. It was very sad when we were finished our time there, but it was literally saying happy life. And that just kind of just said so much to us, and just thanking us for what we had contributed to her. So
that's amazing. I love, look, that's a beautiful sentiment. And what I'm taking away from this is that as artists and as adults, we don't have time to play as much as we definitely should be. You know, there's such a rich, diverse range of outcomes from this project, including just feeling good. I am going to quickly read out some comments. Mina's asked, which school may have missed this? Which school was it you were working in?
Oh, Seaholme Primary School. So again, we chose the school because it's connected to, it's local, but also they have their shorebirds there as well. And the teacher, Elaine, has a passion for migratory birds and birds as well. That's amazing. The art teacher at Seaholme.
Amazing. Look, thank you so much, both of you, for... I could talk to you all afternoon. I mean, there's so much there, and I am sorry to rush you through. If there's any final comments or questions, pop them in the chat. Otherwise...
What we'll do with this, one of the birds, does this fly?
Yeah, here we go.
Here we go. And if you can imagine, you've got like an Annie Lennox kind of soundtrack. Who was the other band? The Eels.
Amazing. Reminds me of Moltres Pokemon.
You can't.
I can't make it move, but you get the idea.
It's got flapping wings.
Geoffrey tied a knot and
I love it.
Made it so the wings flapped, and
you should organize a studio visit. Like, there's so much to look at here. Mina's saying we want another session. I agree. I could talk to you two all afternoon. I do want to say thanks to everyone for the last 6 weeks for dropping in for home delivery, Click and Connect. It's been an amazing experience. We've seen a lot of great performances, incredible artists doing amazing work. And I do want to also mention that Council's developed a new phase of the home delivery program. It's called Home Delivery Performance. When restrictions first began to ease, Hobsons Bay City Council was able to provide venue access to performers at the iconic Williamstown Town Hall. While large capacity restrictions still don't allow for an audience, it did allow for a small film crew who are able to record those performances, and they're going to be released for you over the next 7 weeks, starting on a Friday night at 6 p.m. So make sure next Friday night at 6 p.m. you're checking the Hobsons Bay Creative City socials, and you're kind of linking into that. So thanks again for chatting with us today, Heidi and Geoff, and thank you everyone for dropping by the last 6 weeks.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks for the opportunity.